Welcome to Tell Me More, an Allsteel podcast where design meets innovation and we explore the limitless potential of the modern workplace.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Tell Me More podcast and our friends here at Allsteel. I'm Andrea Gauss and I'm joined here today by two lovely women from JLL. I have Megan and Amy. Amy, will you just briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. My name is Amy Craig, based out of our JLL headquarters in Chicago, Illinois. I've been with JLL for the last 9 years, and I'm an executive vice president in our tenant representation group. Really, what we do is focus on all things related to portfolio management for our clients. So whether they're in office, industrial, retail, any sort of different real estate, we help them globally. So understanding what their footprint would look like in different markets around the country and around the world.
All right. And she is joined by her colleague, Megan. Megan, who are you and what do you do?
I'm Megan Mackinson. I'm also based in Chicago out of JLL's HQ. I've been with JLL for 16 years and I lead our workplace team nationally. So myself and my team help folks like Amy bring the best kind of value to their clients, help them figure out what they need from a space, a workplace strategy, an employee experience need, really all pre-lease and make sure that they're going to sign a lease that they're comfortable with.
All the hard decisions. So today we're going to really be talking about change, and change is it upholster on the business side. So we're starting our first of kind of 3 different perspectives on this idea of change. Here we're going to talk about business and leaders. This next round, our next episode will be on personal and how do we individually adapt and evolve with change. And then lastly, we'll follow up with the space, the physical space itself. So let's dive in here. The pace of change is the fastest it's ever been, and it is the slowest today that it will ever be. That makes my brain hurt just to think about it. But I think change can be a debilitating factor for some clients, and other people can really thrive in change. So I'm going to start with you, Amy. You've watched this arc across the 9 years that you've been with JLL from, desk sharing was kind of an idea that people had, started in Europe, across the pond, to now we're maybe in a little bit of a steadier use case. So where are you seeing companies land here that we are 5 years, 6 years post-pandemic, and what feels like it still might be changing a little bit?
I often joke that the word uncertainty developed from COVID and it's continued 6 years later. And that's still the case because whether it's, uncertainty from different geopolitical climates or whether it's workplace, RTO, right? Those are things that while we may be 6 years post-pandemic, it's still there. And so in terms of a change, I think companies have gotten better at understanding that their space has to be flexible, and the leases that we sign and the places that we go need to be flexible, because who knows what happens next and what other level of uncertainty might be out there. I would say, I think from a post-COVID perspective, I feel like companies have gotten into the swing, and employees, right, have gotten into the swing of things of, okay, I know I go in these number of days, these hours, right? People have kind of gotten into that routine. And I think now businesses are getting their handle around, okay, this is the routine that our employees are following. It's working for our business. Okay, now let's make space changes to accommodate, right, that how often people come into the office. So I think it's making those changes for what we know today, but also planning for flexible space in the future, knowing that the world is uncertain and that things are happening rapidly and that their office space and their space needs to reflect that.
Yeah. Megan, I've heard you say it moved from RTO to ITO. So now we're in the office. And as part of that in the office, people are talking about this flight to quality and this notion that the top tier buildings are the ones that are really having the draw on all the leases. And so what do you think is at the heart of that flight to quality?
Yeah, I really think flight to quality has really become table stakes for almost every company that we're talking about. There is an expectation around employees and companies that there's good design, there's a good mix of collaboration space and focus space, that everyone is going to have access to daylight, that there's going to be amenities within the building or, nearby, whether that's restaurants or fitness centers or childcare, whatever that looks like. Like, that needs to exist to be a draw for employees to come in and for companies to encourage or mandate employees to come in. I think the biggest thing that we're still seeing as it relates to, that flight to quality is, if we've built this and created this environment for our employees, have we also in equal measure expressed the purpose and the value of employees being there? And that's where I think there is still a gap or a disconnect. Amy could probably add on to this more, but we, the top quality trophy buildings in Chicago, but certainly any market that we're working in, those buildings are full. It's the rest of the buildings, when they talk about high vacancy rates, that are not, because companies are all struggling with determining that purpose of the office. And if you don't have that highly amenitized building to go with it, it's a really hard road to go.
Amy, are you seeing amenities being at the building level versus at the tenant level, or what's kind of that mix that you're seeing?
I would say it's still at the building level. There are still spaces within tenant spaces. If you're big enough, right, having the coffee bars or things like that. But in terms of fitness center, tenant lounge space, that's still at the building level. And I think that's just, if you have a tenant that's walking in the door, they expect to see some level of amenities that they can use. Conferencing is always big. A lot of buildings didn't invest a lot of money in their conferencing center, but now tenants expect it, and they expect it to be state-of-the-art technology, expect it to be flexible, where they can have, rooms for 20 people or rooms for 200. It really is table stakes, and you're seeing the buildings that are that trophy, Class A space really invest in their amenities, and it drawing tenants to come to their buildings.
But we shouldn't. But pushing outside those four walls is important too. So, I mean, in the space, in the building, but are you near restaurants? Are you near the train or public transportation? Is there parking in your building or nearby? Like, those are all boxes that I think went from being nice to haves to must haves for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, because if it's going to be worth the commute, it's not just the physical space, but it's every part of that commute and what happens after hours. And it's funny to see and hear people even talk about what does after hours work look like, and how far are people willing to go for that happy hour. And then it's really shifted. Like, it needs to be immediate, it needs to be local in order to kind of engage that culture and enable that thing to happen. So I wanted to focus here a little bit on leading through change, and how part of our roles is to help with consensus building. And we know that strategy is evolving quickly. Business strategy is evolving rapidly. And obviously, lease terms are trying to align maybe a little bit with how fast the business is evolving by shortening their span. But alignment is still super critical amongst leadership, and they're often dispersed. They're on different pages, the speed of change, all those things. So Megan, I'm curious a little bit on kind of that grind of decision consensus, and why is it hard to reach, and kind of what have you seen really help break that log jam?
Well, I think you really nailed it, that there is just so much friction and so much pain around leadership consensus. And really, at least what we see it stem from a workplace strategy perspective, is they're just not aligned on what they need in the future. And, if I pick on really one solid bullet point of that, it's the purpose of the office. It is shocking how many meetings I go into, and if I talk to people separately before that meeting and ask them what the purpose of the office was, that I get completely different answers. It could be, it's knowledge transfer. It could be building culture. It could be because I don't think they're working if I don't see them. It is
micromanagement. That's a good use case.
And it's really, it's each one of those topics, and obviously there's a lot more. Unpacking those different things of, okay, someone isn't in the office 5 days a week. Does that actually translate to good culture? Or, if they're in the office 5 days a week, does that actually translate to them being more productive or working? So there's a lot of root causes to what some of the assumptions are or what some of the beliefs are that leadership has around their workspace, around that purpose of the office, and then how is that being communicated to employees. And so one of the things that I cannot stress enough, and really where we like to start a lot of our process, when a lease is coming up or when a client's thinking about a new space, is we really need to align on the vision and the purpose at that leadership level or at that decision maker level, right?
That's right.
Sometimes one person is making the decision and things can move a lot faster. A lot of times we're seeing companies, right, bring in a lot of meaningful stakeholders, CFO, HR, CEO, et cetera, and really get a rounded view, which is amazing. But it is also meaning that you need to take that step back to quickly align and ensure that everyone is, on the same page as it relates to the future.
To really have that anchoring point. So that's really great advice. How about you, Amy, on the brokerage side? Funnel is full, but I don't know. We're seeing on just like the furniture world, we have a huge funnel, but decisions keep getting pushed. Therefore, orders keep getting pushed. Do you see that on your side? And do you have any other advice for how to keep advising your clients through the process?
I think the biggest thing that we try to focus on is where previously maybe you'd look at a lease that expires, 12 months from now and they're 25,000 square feet, right? You have a renewal option. Maybe you start to address that between 12 to 18 months. Well, given what Megan just said, it is so hard to get alignment that starting it, only 14, 15 months in advance sometimes isn't enough time for us to create the leverage that we need to figure out what space size that you're looking for, right? That's the first step. So there's nothing worse than getting in the market and you're 20,000 square feet one day and then you're up to 30 and then you're back down to 18 the next. So really making sure that we're well in advance of critical dates and things like that. So there is time to get alignment and to build that strategy prior to really even entering the market. So that's one thing that we advise our clients is understand what is the timeline to make those decisions to get that alignment and build in that buffer along with the traditional, real estate process, search, et cetera, that we need in order to negotiate the best deal for our clients. So that's one thing that we try to push timelines early. Some people push back, but it is pretty critical to not putting yourself in a position where you're locked into space or things like that don't work for you. Yep. And then I would say really in terms of making decisions, yes, it has become everything's more scrutinized. And I think a lot of that is to just in our personal lives and work lives, we have so much access to data and information that when it comes time for leaders to make a decision, they expect that same level of data information to be delivered to them in order to make that decision. So, right, that's on us as a brokerage team and a JLL to make sure we're arming our directors of real estate or whomever is in the room making that decision with all the pieces of the puzzle, whether it's market data, whether it's the information on what comps are in the building, whether it's what Megan does in terms of the occupancy and workplace side of things. It's what is the full package of that data and information so then they can go make a decision. And without that data, I think stuff gets scrutinized way more than if you go in with the full package.
Is there a particular type of data that people are asking for today that maybe they weren't 5 years ago, or any unique kind of ask that you think maybe they're onto something?
I think from a traditional lease perspective, when we're looking at leases, our clients and now landlords are understanding that leases need to be more flexible. So while we can still sign a longer term lease, there needs to be optionality in that lease to get out, to expand, contract, whatever it may be to solve those needs. And I would say years ago, it was a little harder to get landlords to come to the table on that thought process. But now it's again, it's almost table stakes, right? They have to do it because other landlords that are more aggressive are offering flexibility. So while financial is, always first and foremost in understanding that the economics of the deal, the lease flexibility piece of it or those non-economic pieces of it are arguably now even more important. So providing that information to leadership of, okay, what happens in 5 years from now if stuff changes? Here's how you can whether build flexibility into your lease, you can get out of your lease, whatever it may be. They're expecting that data and information when they make that decision. So building in lease flexibility has become pretty critical.
Pretty critical. How about you, Megan, on the workplace side? Is there any particular question or request for data that you're frustrated? Like, it's a great question, but you're like, I don't know how to get to it.
I will say utilization data, right, was absolutely a topic of conversation, but again, was more like this is a nice to have versus we are actually looking at this and we are going to make decisions off of this. And it is still very hard to come by. So badge data for, most companies in, large buildings, they can get that. There's still, the margin of error, whether it's, people tailgating, or we always like to joke about our coffee swipers who come in and get their coffee and leave and, give us a miscount. But we're really seeing companies trying to evolve how they look at that. Wi-Fi access points, some are obviously exploring sensors and some other things. And it just still has a way to go. And companies are really just, having trouble getting that data. And then even when they get that data, what assumptions to make on it. So again, that's where we're helping companies think through it, but it's not a one size fits all yet.
For sure. And I know we were chatting a little bit about how pre-COVID occupancy was much lower than people assume. So now as they're looking at that data, they don't even necessarily have a benchmarkable perspective that makes any sense, right? We were never at 100% occupancy in the US. And so to assume we're going to be there now is off, right?
Right. Yeah. I should know the number. I feel like we've been hovering right around like 58% in Chicago. I think across the country, it's in that 60% range. We were in the high 60s pre-COVID. People were always on vacation or traveling for business or out sick or taking care of a sick kid, whatever that looks like. And so space was never fully occupied, but it was one of those that like utilization and that occupancy rate just was not a major focus for many leadership teams. I feel like it's always been a focus for real estate teams, but maybe not some of the other key decision makers. And now, COVID was a catalyst to actually look at like, are we using our space efficiently? There were opportunities to reduce even pre-COVID or optimize, not necessarily reduce.
Right. So speaking of optimization, Amy, you talked a little bit about modifying lease structures to kind of align more so with that business strategy, because we know for forever business strategy has outpaced space change. And so as we think about designing for either flexibility or adaptability, knowing that there's slightly different things there, Megan, what do you think about? Where are you telling people to maybe over invest in flexibility where it might pay off for them when they think about change?
Yeah. I really don't know if I've worked with any client that has over invested yet. I was trying to think about that. I think there's always opportunities like to do more and to make your space more future proof, because you don't know what all your needs are now, and you're signing usually a longer term lease that you want to build in some flexibility. But I do think where we've seen clients make mistakes is spending or building out things in a flexible way that there was no intention of that ever being flexible. One of the examples I like to give is a boardroom. You don't need movable walls in a boardroom. You probably don't need a movable table in there. Like, that room is going to be a boardroom today, and it's going to be a boardroom in 10 years, unless something drastically changes on how you do business, and very drastic. Versus a training room, that is a good investment for movable walls, having tables that are on casters, movable furniture. And then even beyond that room, thinking about where you locate it on your floor plate. Are you located that near a large break room or some other training spaces where, like, by actually opening up that wall, you're creating more space and other options for use of that space. So being strategic about those moments to invest in those areas to invest in, are the big things we talk about. And then there's a few things that I hate that I've said COVID so many times on this podcast, but like pre-COVID is, we were seeing a lot of companies think about sit, stand, desk. That's something that you should give your employees, is a sit, stand, desk. That is a good investment in a flexible piece of furniture that is also going to enhance your employee experience as well. So there's different components like that again, we can help you be thoughtful about how to invest in.
Yeah. So, Amy, how about you? When you think about measuring whether or not a space is working, because at the end of the day, you design in flexibility so that I can do more, right? So, whether it's the building, the neighborhood, the specific build out of the settings, how do you kind of help your clients think about how to measure whether it's good, whether it's great, whether it's okay?
I think a lot of what we're hearing from our clients is just, and especially if you think about like we operate a lot at like the director of real estate level where they have local counterparts in each market that whether run an office or run a market, run a region, things like that, where they're getting feedback, right? After you do a deal, you build out the space, this worked, this didn't work. And it's a lot to do with employee experience. It's interesting. I feel like now more than ever, people are more willing to relocate office buildings than they ever were before. Like a lot of times it was just, a couple thousand square feet, we'll just do a renewal, no big deal, right? And it was a lot of churn where, you may put a little bit of investment in your office, paint carpet, but that was it. And now I feel like that model is changed a little bit where people are a little bit more willing to relocate, maybe because they're able to downsize to save some money. And I think that we're getting that feedback up through the director of real estate that employees are more involved in that decision-making process from an office perspective and ultimately landing somewhere where they may be happier, more productive, or it's better for their business for X, Y, Z or reason. So I think a lot of what we hear is funneled kind of from local leadership up through real estate director. I think we're probably in the first inning of what this really looks like from a flexible space perspective. And we've probably said that the last 6 years, but I think it's just going to continue to change and evolve. And I think each business line in each region, honestly, can be different too. I think if you're in downtown Chicago versus the suburbs of another smaller tertiary market, I think they operate differently from a space and a build-out perspective.
Yeah. So I'm interested, Megan, we use the term living in data to really just kind of refer to this notion that you can't design out of a space, set it and forget it and walk away. Amy, you're seeing data that confirms that hypothesis that people are more willing to make changes as necessary. So how do you help clients get comfortable with that idea of actioning on imperfect information, making decisions, knowing that things are going to change? I mean, are you telling your clients to set aside a portion of their budget to alter things post occupancy? I'm curious. What are you thinking through?
Yeah, I mean that is ideal state is, hey, let's do that buffer so that we can address that from a post occupancy perspective. I mean, when meeting with clients, I really am, we're shooting for 70% here. Like there's going to be so much that changes again over the term of your lease, if not even the, next few months of this project and year. Let's shoot for 70% certainty. We're not going to get to 100, and it is going to be crucial that, from a change management perspective, a communication perspective, we're involving key stakeholders, we're meeting with employees, we really have a robust process to address this, but also that once we move in, once there's post occupancy, that we are taking a moment and a beat to really address that as well and look at what's working or not working and being ready to iterate on that. I guess this example isn't necessarily a recent build, but, I'm working with a client right now that's midway through their lease term and did a post-occupancy study, which, really that's the best thing you could do is every year continue to evaluate. Yeah. And, one of the big pieces of the feedback they got was that there weren't enough phones, right? So they went and they looked at getting a furniture solution to put some more phone rooms in their space since they didn't want to build any out at this moment, which again, great solution. They dropped them in the most high traffic area where these people were on display and no one used them. And they could not understand, wait a second, we got this feedback, we responded to it, and no one uses it. No one's using it, not because they didn't need it. It's because it was a poor location. And that's an example of yes, even though you hear something, you've got to be ready to continue to iterate. So you addressed it, but if it's not working, why isn't it working? And spaces that, again, are flexible or are willing to evolve, the employee satisfaction scores we see coming out of those office spaces are higher than anyone else.
I love that. Adjacencies, so important. And we often overlook How do people get there and are they on display? All that sort of really great stuff.
Yep.
I think that's amazing. We love it when our clients take us up on post-occupancy surveys. I love to have the hard and fast from the people in the seat, not just kind of filtering it up back through, as Amy kind of referred to. How do you get a client to do it, to commit to doing that post-occupancy? I don't know if you've figured it out, because I feel like we haven't yet.
Where we've really pushed for and probably had the most success is when there is an employee survey that goes out on an annual basis, which almost every company has
That's
some
sort. Yep.
shape or form of that. It is
Uh-huh.
put 3 real estate questions in there, and
Mm.
we'll help you figure
Yeah.
out what those are. But 3 meaningful things. We do have one company that I think has done sensors in a really awesome way.
Okay.
They actually own their sensors. They only put them in collaborative, like open and closed collaboration spaces, not in like the focus seats. And then every 90 days, they rotate them to a different area and they make a change on that area. So again, it's not that formal survey, because I do feel like there was survey fatigue for quite a while. And they were like, we don't want to give, our employees another survey, but they are actually using, I'll say, these sensors in a very actionable way, right? That if they're putting them in
Every
a room
90
that's not
days.
getting used,
Yep.
like
Mhm.
let's change that room's furniture, or let's reconfigure this open collaboration area, or let's ask some of the people in that neighborhood around those spaces. And then, I'll say an informal basis of like, why isn't that working? Because we have data showing
Acoustics.
it's
Yeah,
not.
whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love to tease that out. Is it an acoustic problem? Is it a adjacency
Yeah.
problem? Is it a technology? Because, so oftentimes it's the furniture. Well,
Right.
maybe some other things to address as well. Let's talk a little bit about AI, because we don't want this entire conversation to focus on that, but it is at, I think, the center of the question around pace of change. And I know my work on a personal level has shifted rapidly. There are days with the teams that I lead that I'm trying to figure out, how do I scale what I'm learning across, the business that I work in, when the technology is changing so rapidly. I don't even know how to scale it, because whatever I scale today is going to be wrong tomorrow. I think that's a concern. So I'm just curious, Amy, I'm going to start with you. Are you seeing real estate decisions being made because of AI specifically?
I would say, if anything, a lot of businesses are growing because of AI, because maybe that is their business, or that's an adjacency to their business. So they're using it to grow. I would say, I think we're still in early stages. We haven't seen, at least I haven't seen, the effect on job creation and things like that in terms of space size. Like, I can downsize because these people are no longer with the company because of the jobs are taken over by AI. I have not personally seen that yet, but that obviously is something that is, I think, in the back of people's minds of what does that look like in the future. But I think, if anything, it's helping businesses grow to new markets and new industries that maybe they haven't before, because their employees and their people are able to be more productive using AI and things like that.
How about you, Megan? And what's your perspective on
Uh, um,
AI and its future to our world?
yeah, I agree with Amy. I have not worked with any companies that have downsized because of AI. If anything, it's been the opposite. I do feel like, especially in like media headlines, we sometimes see that as an out for many companies, but most of the companies I work with are growing. I'm gonna not give someone the proper quote credit, but I feel like I heard somewhere like we're seeing a lot of AI jobs be reshaped versus replaced. And I think that's very true for what we're seeing. Is like there are a lot of companies that are pivoting how those workers are working. And honestly, the companies that are doing that, or the employees that are doing that, those are who those companies want to retain, but also hire, that are able to pivot, able to use AI, able to grow their business line, because the volume of work is increasing and giving them more business because of that efficiency. So
Yep.
AI has only been a positive thing so far that we've seen.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's historic in that we're turning so many different directions so much faster. I think the speed of innovation because of AI, I don't have to go through 4 revs on a concept before I show up with an opinion. I can do it so much more rapidly and get to consensus, I think, more quickly. I'm curious, in your 2 specific functions, if I can ask you this, how are you using AI? Or maybe what has been the most meaningful way that you're using it? Is it data? Is it research? Is it synthesis? Is it a thought partner? How are you using AI the most?
I use it for almost anything. Even if it's just quick things that like where it's, can you double check this? Can you like even just quick email checks, deck checks, things like that, where they may have taken a long time. It can quickly actually understand it's different than just a spell check, right? Those simple things
Right.
where it may have taken me 30 minutes to review something now can only take me 5. So
Mhm.
it can point out inefficiencies from that perspective. So that's just like a general comment. But we use it a lot for data analysis. So understanding what does it look like when you receive a proposal back from the landlord? How does that compare to market? What's the research associated with it? And how can we continue to kind of drive that deal forward? We kind of use it, but I still think I've been using it. I would say probably for about more religiously for 6 to 12 months. And I feel like I get better and better at it. So you could
Every
probably
day.
ask me
Mhm.
this question in 6 months and I'll probably have a completely different answer
Right.
and be able to use it even more effectively. So which is
That's
pretty
the
cool. I
goal.
find myself
Yeah.
using it more and more, honestly,
Yeah.
daily.
I went on vacation for a week and I came back and I was like, I'm behind. It's crazy how rapidly it's changing. How about you,
Yeah.
Megan?
Yeah. I mean, we are definitely starting to use it from like a floor plan analysis perspective, doing test fits, feasibility, looking at efficiency of buildings. So we're using in that regard. Me personally, though, I was actually joking with my team about this the other day that I used to have a lot of monologues with myself. Most of them were in my head. Sometimes they were not. And now I've started having those monologues with Claude. And it's
Mhm.
one of those where, I was working with a client that is actually evaluating some different IWMS systems. And
Okay.
like part of it was like, what are all the pain points that they are going through? Search my emails. And I'm a really diligent note taker. Look at all my notes of anything I've explained. These are standards. So kind of started outlining everything. And then I was like, make me a matrix on like why we think that IWMS system is going to be best for them. And then I could go back to the client and say, right, like, here's my brain
Mhm.
that Claude
Mhm.
organized hopefully in a better way than I would have. And
Mhm.
it's hopefully providing meaningful impacts back to them. Right. It's not necessarily coming up with a solution, but it's helping organize some data and aggregating all of the knowledge, not only that like we have, but also, I mean, in that specific IWMS example, like we work with a lot of companies that use that. So even pulling in like what are our lessons learned across other clients.
My favorite AI story from like the last 2 weeks, I was working on a project and I used one of the AI tools that I have here, and it went and scraped my desktop and it was like, you did this 19 months ago. Did you forget about this thing that you did? Just go use it. I was like, oh my word, I
Yeah.
completely, and I think that it as my own like indexer of all the files of all the things,
Yeah.
that right there alone has been a life changer for me.
Yes.
That's great.
Also, on a personal note, my car unfortunately recently got stolen
Oh
and,
no.
was working through insurance on our claim, and they send you that lovely 35-page document of like what they're going to cover and not cover. Drop that in, help me write a response email that says I need, support with XYZ. It was a beautiful thing. So
It's a
everyone
beautiful
should be using
thing.
Claude in their personal life
Yeah,
too.
I mean, it planned on my next vacation for me. So
Yeah.
absolutely, I'm here for it. What about space types? Let's talk about the
Yeah.
physical workspace itself here for just a second. Do you
Well,
think, go
yeah.
ahead, Megan,
No,
where
no,
are you
I was going to
going?
say back on topic, but still
Back
AI
on topic.
related is, I mean, a lot of the companies we're talking about that are really, focused on AI, there's this pendulum swing that went from we want all these open, collaborative desking areas to we need focused areas. And focused
Mm,
areas can still be at a desk, but it's maybe
right.
designating neighborhoods that are that, phone, team
Quiet
Zoom free
area. Yep.
spaces. Or it could be one of the big trends we've been talking to a lot of clients about is micro offices. Like, do
Hmm.
you build these smaller, super efficient office spaces because employees are only coming in 3 days a week in this organization, and it doesn't make sense for them to have an 150 square foot office anymore. So that's something we've looked at. I think we even had like a stat that like phone rooms and focus rooms, when we were looking at the floor plans we've done, are up like, I think it was like 12 to like 15%.
Wow.
Is we're
Yeah.
building more of those from a dense perspective. And then the other thing, I haven't seen it yet, but I think it's coming, is I'm going to call it lab space. That's probably not the right word for it, but I'm going to say like specialty spaces, rooms, desks that, again, related to AI, but not totally, but need more cooling, need more power requirements, need some focused, dedicated space to work on these different technologies that are evolving is something that I think is coming.
I do too. Yeah. Cloud computing only gets you so far. So what does that look like if you have edge computing, whatever? I think there is going to be a physical change to the building, to the floor plate, at least in the short term. And I guess that's another change. We'll be here for it because that's what we do. All right. Anybody have any advice you want to give to a leader right now that just is really having trouble keeping up with the pace of change? Any words of wisdom? Anything you want to leave us with?
I would say just building in flexibility, at least taking a traditional lease that may be inflexible and trying to build in as much flexibility as you can, because there is going to be change. It is inevitable. And
It's one thing we know.
while you cannot totally control it, what you can control, at least in this moment in time, from like our perspective, from a real estate perspective, is how can we push landlords to give as much flexibility, whether that's flexibility in terms of the budget and the improvement allowance that you get, whether it's optionality for growth, contraction, right? Focusing on those while economics will win the day, but flexibility, I think if I was sitting in a real estate leader's shoes, that is where I would focus my energy on a negotiation perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Megan?
And I think I would probably just say, like, stop waiting for that 100% certainty. Like, you need to be asking yourself, like, what do you want the future of your office to be? What are those pain points? Is it culture? Is it, you need to grow? Are there cost savings? Whatever that is, you need to align on that North Star with your leaders, and everything else will follow.
Yeah. I think our perspective is change. It's not something that we should try to manage. It's something we need to move with, and that we're going to win by jumping in with both feet and, failing, but quickly adapting. All right. And moving forward. Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us on the Tell Me More podcast. We've got 2 more episodes. Our next one, we're going to talk about change at a personal level and dive in and think through how change affects us and how we can move through the stages and thinking about that as we move forward. So thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Tell Me More. For more insights and stories, subscribe on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and connect with us on social @Allsteel. See you next time.